We're witnessing a structural transformation in China's power sector, arguably the most significant shift in decades. By 2025, the full rollout of electricity spot markets will fundamentally redefine how power is priced, traded, and ultimately valued. In this analysis, we're going to break down this transition, its core mechanics, and the profound implications it holds for every single asset across the energy value chain.
So, let's get straight to the bottom line. The traditional way of analyzing this sector, based on fixed prices and planned generation, is now completely obsolete. The real heart of this reform is price discovery. We're moving from a system where prices are set by administrators to one where the market determines the true economic value of electricity. And the direct consequence of that? A comprehensive and frankly unavoidable reevaluation of every asset in the sector.
All right, here's our roadmap. We'll start with the fundamental reshaping of the market itself. Then, we'll dive into the new pricing mechanism. We'll look at critical insights from the provincial pilot programs, examine the 4 main asset classes being redefined, and finally, talk about the key indicators you need to be watching to navigate this new era.
So first, let's just appreciate the scale of this change. That 2025 deadline for every province to have a spot market isn't just a policy update. It's a hard break from the entire history of a centrally planned system. This isn't a gradual evolution. It's a foundational overhaul of how the market works.
This reform really introduces a much more sophisticated, a much more granular way of pricing. Where the price of a megawatt hour used to be pretty much a flat number. Market forces are now assigning it a constantly fluctuating value based on 3 key things. When it's used, which reflects peak and off-peak demand. Where it is on the grid, which accounts for bottlenecks, and its scarcity, which for the first time reveals the true economic worth of flexibility and reliability.
And make no mistake, this isn't some distant future. This transition is already well underway. The data shows that nearly 2/3 of China's electricity is already traded through market mechanisms. What the 2025 reform does is inject high-frequency spot pricing right into the core of this huge marketized segment, which is just going to amplify its impact exponentially.
So the question is, how does this new market actually function? Well, it's essentially a dual-track system. It has 2 parts that work together. One is designed for stability, you can think of it as the ballast, and the other is for real-time price signals, the bellwether. The long-term contracts act as that ballast. They give generators and big consumers a way to lock in revenues and costs, providing a stable foundation and hedging against risk. The spot market, on the other hand, is the bellwether. It's dynamic, it's volatile, but its price signals are what tell you the real-time value of electricity, and that's the crucial data that will guide operations and future investments.
Now here's a really critical shift. Those long-term contracts, they're no longer just about delivering physical power. They're morphing into financial hedging tools called contracts for difference, or CFDs. Basically, the parties just settle the cash difference between their fixed contract price and the fluctuating spot price. This turns the contract into a pure financial hedge, but it also creates huge new risks, especially for electricity retailers who now have to actively manage this price exposure or face serious consequences.
Okay, that's the theory. But what does this all look like in the real world? To understand that, we have to look at the data coming out of the real-world stress tests, the pilot programs in key provinces. These are giving us invaluable insights into how these dynamics are actually playing out.
Let's start with Shandong. It's a province with a lot of traditional thermal power plants. The big challenge there was, how do you keep these critical assets economically viable when the market is being flooded with cheap renewable energy? What was happening is that zero-cost solar power was pushing daytime electricity prices way down, and that was crushing the revenue of thermal plants. Shandong's solution was to create a capacity compensation mechanism. It's a system that pays these plants not just for the energy they generate, but for simply being available to the grid when needed. This completely redefines their value. They're not just energy producers anymore. They're essential providers of stability. Next, let's look at the other side of the coin with Gansu Province. This is a crucial test case for a system that has an incredibly high level of renewable energy.
In Gansu, huge amounts of wind and solar power have to sell directly into the spot market. The result? During peak renewable production, there's such an oversupply of zero-cost energy that prices often crash to zero or even go negative. This puts intense downward pressure on the energy revenue for all these renewable projects, and it exposes a core structural risk for these assets in this new market design. So what these pilots in Shandong and Gansu clearly show is that this reform is completely reshuffling the deck, fundamentally changing what different assets are worth. And we can really group the consequences into 4 distinct categories of assets that are being reshaped.
First, you have power, IT, and digitalization. This is the classic selling shovels in a gold rush, providing the essential software for trading and risk management. Second are flexibility resources, things like energy storage, which are designed to profit directly from price swings. Third, you've got the experienced regional power companies, whose early experience in the pilot markets gives them a major head start. And finally, there's grid infrastructure, whose value is no longer just about transmission capacity, but its ability to manage congestion and act as a hub for trading.
Now, this isn't all going to happen at once. We see this market evolving in 3 logical phases. Right now, through 2025, it's all about the foundational build-out of IT systems and the first wave of energy storage. Then, from 2025 to 2027, the focus is going to shift to connecting provincial grids and really optimizing those flexible assets. Then, after 2028, we'll see a mature market where the advantage goes to operators with the best cost structures and the ability to fully monetize environmental value.
So how do you navigate this new era? Well, it demands a completely new analytical lens. You essentially have to throw out the old playbook and focus on a new set of emerging risks and a new dashboard of key performance indicators. 2 critical risks really stand out. The first, which we saw clearly in Gansu, is the relentless downward pressure on the energy-based revenue for renewable projects. The second is a huge credit and liquidity risk for electricity retailers. Think about it. They're caught in a squeeze, buying power at volatile spot prices while often selling it to their customers at a fixed price. Without sophisticated hedging, that's a recipe for disaster. This brings up a huge question. If renewables can't always make money selling their energy, how do they stay financially viable? The answer lies in separating or unbundling their environmental value and selling it as a completely different product, the Green Certificate, or GEC. And this is not just a theoretical idea. Just look at the trading data. The average price for these green certificates more than doubled in just a few months. This trend is hard evidence of a rapidly maturing market, where the greenness of electricity is becoming its own valuable, tradable commodity, specifically designed to make up for lower returns from the energy market itself. All of this means that for anyone analyzing this sector, your dashboard has to change. You're not just tracking generation volumes anymore. The new KPIs are things like the price spread between peak and off-peak hours, because that's what drives storage profits. You have to monitor GEC prices, because that's central to renewable revenues. You need to analyze capacity payment rules for thermal stability. And you have to follow approvals for ultra-high voltage grid projects, because that's the backbone of a true national market. And this all leads to the final, central question. This reform has unleashed market forces to value electricity in a far more complex way than ever before. As volatility becomes the new normal, the ultimate dynamic to watch is how the market is going to price 3 things that were previously hidden or bundled together: system flexibility, grid location, and environmental value. And the answer to that question will define the next generation of winners and losers in China's power sector.